Hello, everyone. My name is Vishnu Nair. I am an assistant professor at University of Reading, UK. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for putting this conference or symposium together and creating this space. So in my talk, I'm going to focus on research findings on bilingual advantage, specifically critically examining the construct of what does it mean to have a bilingual advantage. Now, bilingual advantage is a highly popular concept under research findings, highly popularized through media, and it is conceptualized as an advantage in executive functioning skills, specifically for attentional networks, inhibition, problem solving, planning, and this is argued to have emerged from bilinguals' experience with multiple languages. Now, this research is interdisciplinary, situated within the major fields of psycholinguistics, cognitive science, experimental psychology, and developmental psychology. Now, the advantage or disadvantage is a highly contentious debate that has faced a replication crisis, and studies that report either an advantage or disadvantage have been critiqued for inadequately controlling or utilizing appropriate tasks or their usage of age range or of participants, linguistic experience of bilinguals, their interactional context, etc. However, the crucial characteristics of studies that report an advantage is that they have been highlighted as departing from earlier studies that have claimed, bilingual children as having a low IQ or lower cognitive ability or even a mental handicap. So on this slide, I really want to transcend beyond the dichotomous characterization of advantage versus disadvantage and pose a series of provocations. Now, these are very basic questions, but then I have been thinking about these questions for a while. Now, the first question I would like to ask is bilingual advantage debate apolitical? Now, if you really look at studies and generally the research findings of bilingual advantage, now this is really presented as an apolitical and objective debate. However, from very early on, from those studies that reported a bilingual disadvantage, and these studies have included immigrant bilingual children and call them as having a mental handicap or lower cognitive abilities compared to English monolingual children. So we can already see a political ideology enforced into this debate, which is totally overlooked and erased in the current debate. Now, the second provocation I would like to ask is where is the subject speaking from? Now, this is not a unique question. Decolonial scholars have long emphasized the importance of what they call the locus of enunciation, the geopolitical location by which the subject is speaking from. So from that perspective, bilingualism is conceptualized in these debates through a very white lens, and the methodologies have been implemented or utilized is typically from a white positivist lens. And therefore, much like any psycholinguistic debate or language-based research that has been critiqued, bilingual advantage debate is also a global northern white debate. Even if one has to argue that that these findings are replicated across the labs around the world, it still perpetuates a coloniality because the paradigms that have been utilized to study bilingual advantage, whether it is a cognitive or linguistic tasks that are utilized, are borrowed from very dominant, northern institutions and the paradigms that are based on that. Now, I just want to elaborate a little bit more on some of these dominant ideologies present in these debates. So therefore, my third question pertains to how is bilingualism characterized within these dominant frameworks and also within the bilingual advantage studies. Now, in order to answer these questions, I have reviewed a series of studies. Now, what you're looking at is some example screenshots from those studies that I have reviewed, and you can see their title. Now, I haven't obviously included all these studies because it will take more slides, but there are more studies, obviously. So these are just examples. But as you can see from the titles, they not only show bilingualism as an advantage or disadvantage, so they definitely characterize bilingualism within those binaries. But if you really look at the last image, you will also see that bilingual advantage is actually framed within this framing of language as very discrete, fossilized, independent languages. So it's like three languages in one mind, almost like three monolinguals in one mind, which is a very old argument. Against treating bilingualism that way, but you can see that ideology is reproduced in these studies. Now, once you look into the methodologies, now when you really look into these methodologies within these studies, you can see bilinguals are clearly defined through a native speaker lens, but also they are compared to monolinguals. For example, not able to name a picture quickly in their native language or even in their L2, which is normally English, compared to monolinguals. Now, these framings, as you can imagine, is totally inconsistent with the global Southern notions of bilingualism, where we know bilinguals engage in very fluid community practices and language practices. Now, there is a large body of literature out there on translanguaging and translingualism, which I'm not really going to elaborate. But what I really also want to look at is beyond these deficit ideologies. My larger point is also to show that this ideology around, or this debate around bilingualism actually perpetuates very much capitalist ideologies. So bilingualism is considered to be one of those life experiences that can boost cognitive reserve or cognitive abilities for Northern citizens. Now, Maria Choi Pena has argued that this is treating bilingualism as an elitist commodity. Now, I argue that bilingualism is treated as an option, wherein, for Northern citizens to boost their cognitive skills, where for global Southern population, this is not an option, but the very basis for their everyday community survival. Multiple fluid languages are utilized for community sustenance and survival. So it is immaterial for global Southern population or global majority bilinguals whether bilingualism has an advantage or not. So as you can see, this is very much a white global Northern debate that we are talking about. Now, Choi Penier also asked if the debate around advantage has any real life implications for racialized bilinguals. Now, one can argue about the truth value in the advantage versus disadvantage binary, but the reality is that for racialized bilinguals, their bilingualism is looked down upon, whether it is Spanish spoken in the US or Bengali spoken in London. These bilinguals and racialized bilingual children are marginalized for their language use. So this has been totally overlooked. What does it mean to have an advantage? Who are we talking about here, right? So therefore, I would argue that the cognitive and psychological research on bilingual advantage research is completely race evasive. In my final slide, I would like to point out that a critical and decolonial turn has already taken place in applied linguistics, at least in the pockets of applied linguistics. But psycholinguistics and cognitive science, findings is treated as objective, universally applicable. So it's far more dangerous to have this type of ideologies, especially this kind of uncritical acceptance of research findings, especially how race evasive and colonial ideologies are actually completely masked in these not only in the conceptualization but also in the ideologies and methodologies, and what implication that kind of findings have on racialized population. I would like to end by saying I know this symposium is all about critically examining these ideologies, But as grand narratives around bilingualism is being built and popularized by the media, as a scholar from the margin, I leave this question with you. What does it mean to resist dominant framework and reclaim our own epistemological truth? What does it mean to be resisting and being skeptical about an advantage versus disadvantage categorization, and cultivate scholarship honoring our own standpoint knowledge on community practices in relation to languages? So that's the reflection I would like to leave the audience and myself with, and hopefully we can have a larger discussion on this topic. Thank you very much.